How you doing, guys? We're going to talk today about the Cold War. We're going to continue to talk about the Cold War. We're going to talk about the Red Scare and how the Cold War kind of develops in the United States after World War II. There are some events that occur immediately after the war in the 1940s and early 50s that lead Americans to really fear the growth of communist influence in the United States. We're going to talk about those things and how they develop. We're going to talk about the fear of communism, the way the government fought the spread of communism, and we're going to talk about McCarthyism and his role in the Red Scare as well. All right, so in 1949, the Soviet Union basically in September of that year tests a nuclear bomb, an atomic bomb. And this was a shock to the nation because most Americans assumed that we were the only people, the only country that had that technology. And when the Soviets tested one, it was a great shock. Also in the year of 1949, communism or China fell to communists. China had been involved in the Civil War before and after World War II, and basically the communists came out on top. The communists led by Mao Zedong defeated Jiang Zemin or Chiang Kai-shek of the nationalists. So Mao leads the communists to victory against the nationalists. So that causes Americans to fear this communist threat as well. So Soviet testing atomic weapons and the communists winning the Chinese Civil War. As an answer to that, the United States government institutes, or the United States Congress institutes the House Un-American Activities Committee. And HUAC, as it was called, HUAC, basically will investigate radical groups in the United States, including fascists, but mostly communists. This committee is going to go on to become, part of the engine pushing the Red Scare. Truman also creates a plan to investigate all federal employees. The Smith Act is passed, making it a crime to call for the overthrow of the U.S. government, not just to try to overthrow the government, but just to call for it. And you also had the McCarthyism Act and other laws that do that as well. There's also several spy cases, Alger Hiss, the Rosenbergs, all of which kind of fuel this fear. All right, so HUAC we talked about, and specifically focused on the film industry in Hollywood. And in fact, they call numbers of Hollywood actors, mostly directors and screenwriters, in front of the committee to testify against themselves or against others in Hollywood. The Hollywood 10 are 10 of these people that refuse to answer their questions about their beliefs or those of their colleagues. And the Hollywood 10 and many others in Hollywood basically are blacklisted. In other words, they're never going to get a job after this period. So many sacrifice their career and their well-being to defend their own and their associates' rights to be part of any organization. Truman investigated employees. Investigation turned up little evidence, but it did kind of make sure that it showed that Truman was serious about fighting communism. All right, the Smith Act. The Smith Act allowed the government to basically arrest and try people for calling for the overthrow of the U.S. government. And Truman actually uses this act to convict or to arrest many leaders, and their convictions, they were convicted and they were upheld by the Supreme Court in Dennis versus the United States. So the Smith Act was one legislation. Also, you had the McCarthyism Act, and it required communist organizations to register with the government and establish a special board to investigate these organizations. Similar to the Smith Act, it made it illegal to plan a totalitarian dictatorship, and it prevented communist immigrants from entering the United States as well. And some of the more famous spy cases, Alger Hiss was convicted of being a spy for the Soviets. Actually, he wasn't. He was convicted not of being a spy, but he was convicted of perjury, of lying on the stand. Klaus Fuchs, a Manhattan Project scientist, he helped develop the atomic bomb. He was convicted of giving information to the Soviets. And then Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were a married couple that worked in the State Department. They were convicted of passing secrets to the Soviets. And they were actually sentenced to death and killed via the electric chair in probably the most famous spy case in American history. All right, probably the most famous person to come out of the Red Scare, the second Red Scare, was Joseph McCarthy. He was a senator from Wisconsin who claimed that there were 205 known communists working for the State Department. Now, Truman dismissed him. He said, we've already investigated this. This isn't true. He said he was a ballyhoo artist. And many of McCarthy's critics, basically lampooned his spreading of fear and making charges that didn't have evidence. They called it McCarthyism. There's a popular play called the Crucible that you guys may have read in classes, English classes, that talks about, it's basically about McCarthyism. It's just under the guise of talking about the Salem witch trials. But he rarely backed up his claims with evidence, and yet he gets a reputation because he's loud, he's brash. He gets a reputation as being a top fighter of communism. But anyway, so he specifically targeted another senator by the name of Millard Tydings, who was a senator from Maryland, and he basically humiliated the senator and became more or less a celebrity in the meantime. McCarthyism does spread beyond the Senate into the other branches of government, specifically the State Department, and he'll later target the Army itself, but also universities, labor unions, private businesses. There becomes this effort to hunt down and get rid of communist influence in each of these. All right, so McCarthy uses his power as a senator to make these wild accusations, but they become even more and more unfounded and kind of out there. And in 52, he actually began to go after people in his own party. He becomes so convinced of communist influence that he starts attacking even his allies. And in 1954, he really takes the last step while attacking the U.S. Army. Okay. Keep in mind, the Army at the time had just finished fighting communists in Korea, so this was not a very popular claim. Eventually, the U.S. Army committee hearings are put on TV, and people can really see for the first time what McCarthy is, and he's a bully. McCarthy fades away, and he is embarrassed by the committee hearings. He's shown as kind of a bully and a fraud, and basically he becomes a laughingstock, and he dies a few months later probably of complications from alcoholism. He was a heavy drinker, and anyway, so McCarthyism fades away, but the Red Scare certainly has not ended. Communism, fear of communism is still ever present, especially in a nuclear world. All right, so now we're going to watch a little quick video clip, about 4.5 minutes, that basically shows the U.S. Army hearings and kind of the downfall of McCarthy. And the reason we're watching this video is because it has probably one of the most famous quotes to McCarthy. And this is by an attorney that was representing one of the people that had been accused by McCarthy and brought before the Senate committee. And the attorney's name is Welch. But he basically spars with McCarthy here, and this is a really good. He makes the famous quote: "Have you left at long last? Have you left no decency, sir?" or something like that. And it kind of is the final downfall of Joseph McCarthy. So we'll watch this video, and then we'll move along.
But your forgiveness will have to come from someone other than me. Criminal confession. say that Mr. Welch talked about this being cruel and reckless. He was just baiting, he has been baiting Mr. Cohen here for hours, requesting that Mr. Cohen, before sundown, get out of any department of the government anyone who's serving the communist cause. Now, I just give this man's record, and I want to say, Mr. Welch, that it has been labeled long before he became a member, as early as 1944.
Senator, they would not have dropped it. We know he belongs to minor skills. And Mr. Cole nods his head at me. I did too. I take no personal injury, Mr. Cole. I never do you no personal injury. And if I did, I beg your pardon. Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. What you have done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of peace?
I know the truth, Mr. Welch.
I'll say it.
I understand if the camera can find a personal person, I'd like to finish this.
Senator, I think it hurts you too, sir.
I'd like to finish this. I know Mr. Cohen would rather not have any good of this. I intend to, however, and Mr. Welch talks about any sense of decency. It seems that Mr. Welch is pain so deeply, he thinks it's improper for me to give the record, the communist front record, of a man whom he wanted to foist upon this committee. But it doesn't pain him at all. There's no pain in his chest about the attempt to destroy the reputation. And he take the jobs away from the young men who are working in my committee. And Mr. Welch, if I have said anything here which is untrue, then tell me. I have heard you and everyone else talk so much about laying the truth upon the table, that when I heard completely phoning Mr. Welch, I listened now for a long time to say, now before sundown, you must get these people out of government. So I just want to have it very clear that you were not so serious about that when you tried to recommend this man to this committee. But the point is, Mr. Chair, I'd like to say again that he doesn't have any want to recommend him petition counsel for this committee. And he had to do his office. All the recommendations that were made, and not recall any of them coming from Mr. Welch, and that would include Mr. Higgins. Well, let me ask Mr. Welch. You brought him down, did you not, to act as your assistant?
Mr. McCarthy, I will not discuss this further with you. You have sat within 6 feet of me and could have asked me about Fred Fisher. You have seen fit to bring it out, and if there is a God in heaven, it will do neither you nor your cause any good. I will not discuss it further. I will not ask Mr. Cole any more witnesses. You, Mr. Chairman, may, if you will, call the next witness.
All right, so there you see, kind of the downfall or the final exposure of McCarthy as kind of a shyster, who was making up these claims and things of that nature. Although later on, historical evidence does go on to prove that there was a significant communist threat in some areas of government. Most of the names that McCarthy had were either not communist, or they certainly weren't active against the U.S. government or spies or anything of that nature. So, but McCarthyism kind of becomes a fitting kind of example of what the Red Scare was all about. These kind of baseless accusations and unfounded fears against communism. And this is fed by the Korean War that's going on at that time. So in our next slide, we'll talk about Korea and how the United States gets into it and out of it. So we'll talk more about that the next time. See you guys.